Peace and Sustainable Development at UNESCO, to give her welcome remarks.
Thank you so much, Wong, and a very good morning. I know it's very early morning for some of you, and good afternoon. I want to wish you all a very warm welcome to this second edition of UNESCO's series of online workshops exploring the transformative power of education for sustainable development for the world beyond COVID-19. These monthly online events invite stakeholders from the education and sustainability communities to discuss the kind of world we want to live in beyond COVID-19 and what is needed to build back better. In particular, we want to look at how the power of education for sustainable development can be harnessed to facilitate the transformation required for a more sustainable world.
Good morning. Hi.
As you are aware, UNESCO is the lead agency for education for sustainable development, and through ESD we are promoting the knowledge, skills, values and attitudes that empower people to contribute to sustainable development as spelled out in the SDG 4.7. Today we're focusing on education for sustainable development in digital and remote settings. And since the beginning of this year, school closures due to the pandemic impacted more than 90% of the global student population. Working with our many partners, UNESCO is supporting countries in their efforts to ensure continuity of learning, particularly for more vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. As we all know, within a very short time, education was moved from the classrooms and learning centers to online learning or remote learning through radio, television, or self-directed learning with books and other materials. While the search for new and effective forms of remote learning continues in a prolonged pandemic, today's online workshop explores how ESD learning can take place under physical distancing regulations in high and low resource settings. In particular, we will look into two questions. Number one, what are the learnings from the pandemic with regard to how ESD can continue to be delivered through remote learning? And secondly, how can we build systems and processes that ensure that ESD learning can continue in digital or remote formats during COVID-19 or similar crisis? I hope that in today's discussion, we'll not only share good practices and learnings from across the world, but also brainstorm on how to ensure that ESD can continue in a creative and innovative manner during school lockdowns. I wish to thank you all for joining this workshop, and I hope that the discussions will inspire your work for years to come within the new framework of ESD for 2030. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research and the German Commission for UNESCO for their partnership and continuous support, in particular in organizing the ESD World Conference, which is now scheduled for May next year, and for this series of online workshops. Thank you, and I hope you will really enjoy the conversation today.
Thank you very much, Vibeke, for your kind remarks. As Vibeke has mentioned, today's topic is on ESD in digital and remote settings. In particular, around the two questions. First of all, what were the learnings from the pandemic on how ESD can be best supported digitally and remotely? And the second question on how can resilient ESD structures be built that ensure that ESD learning can continue in digital or remote format. For the first half of this 1-hour session, we will have interviews with the 4 panelists, followed by moderated question and answer. To raise questions or to share your comments, please use the Q&A box or the comment box below. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing today's 4 panelists who will share their experiences on ESD in digital and remote learning settings. First, I would like to introduce Ms. Maria Anagnostidou, She's a teacher at the 3rd primary school of Ceres, which is one of the UNESCO associated schools in Greece. During the lockdown last spring, she worked in cooperation with another school in Poland and explored new opportunities on ESD in digital settings. Mr. Christian Velez Ramirez is the General Coordinator of Environmental Education at the Amazon Rescue Center and the Amazon Forever in Peru. The Amazon Rescue Center educates to protect the Amazon by welcoming visitors on programs like Day in the Forest. And he and his colleagues had to adapt when learners could no longer make the visit. Ms. Kathleen Usher is a science specialist from English Montreal School Board in Canada. She will share her experience of collaborating with an international team of curators to design a digital platform called Earth School, which was launched by the UN Environment in partnership with TED-Ed, UNESCO, and other partners. And finally, Mr. Yusuke Morita is a professor in the Faculty of Human Sciences at Waseda University in Japan. Yusuke will share the lessons learned from the digital learning in Japan, as well as his outlook on how we can build a more resilient structure on ESD using new technologies such as virtual reality. So Maria, Christian, Kathleen, and Yusuke, thank you very much for joining us. And before we begin, I would like to now invite for a quick quick warm-up with a couple of questions to see where we stand. We will now see on the screen 2 questions. Please share your answers by clicking on the screens. The first question is, did you or your organization continue ESD activities during school closures and physical distancing? Yes, no, partly. And if yes, what medium did you use to continue ESD activities during the pandemic? You can choose all that apply. So we can have a quick round of survey just to see where we stand before we jump into the 2 questions of the discussion. Okay. Now, for all of us, the pandemic hit unexpectedly and suddenly, disrupting our daily lives and our plans. And educators, learners, and parents had to quickly adapt to the school closures and physical distancing measures. So now let us quickly take a look on where we stand in the results. Yes. So it seems that the majority of our participants either had continued to work on ESD activities during the school closure, 67%, and partly also 27%. So that comes to around more than 90% in total. And among the medium that was used during the pandemic to continue the ESD activities, seems that by a majority, of course, internet using online meeting tools, blogs, and websites were used largely across all parts of the world. And also telephone seems to be the second most used medium next to the internet. So it is indeed true that in some parts of the world, internet connection is indeed a big challenge. And this digital divide question will be one of the questions that we will raise during the discussion. Thank you very much for your inputs. And we can see from the results that from trial and error over the past months, many of us have learned to cope with the crisis as best as possible. And building on our collective experiences, the first question that we have today is, what were the learnings from the pandemic on how ESD can be best supported digitally and remotely? So maybe let us start with you, Yusuke. I would like to now invite Yusuke to speak. How did the schools in Japan adapt to the crisis? Maybe you could share some of the experiences in Japanese schools, Yusuke.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. So it was quite challenging for all of us to adapt to this situation. However, for example, Kumamoto City in Japan, so during the first wave of COVID-19, school had sustained by using the apps for interactive online communication. Teachers and the students were able to exchange the health conditions and stay connected. Now students are able to work in small groups, keeping your social distance with masks, discuss and work together to carry out research and summarizing activities, cultivate problem-solving skills based on the original ESD learning map. In an emergency such as the COVID-19 crisis, it is more important to secure learning community and quality education in many different ways. For quality education, it is not enough to be connected online, but it is important that teachers, students, and the parents are mentally connected.
That's very inspiring story. Thank you, Yusuke, for sharing. And indeed, it is quite interesting that the schools and local authorities not only quickly adapted to the situation, but also try to use it as an opportunity to transform the way of teaching and learning for the better. So I think that's very interesting. Thank you very much, Yusuke. And Kathleen, over to you now. I think the Earth School was in fact created as an immediate response to the pandemic, right?
Yes, exactly. Earth School came about very quickly, and it was in response to the sudden shutdown in schools worldwide. This was a partnership between, as you mentioned earlier, UNEP and TED Ed. And this brought together 50 people, 50 curators, specialists. These were professors, scientists, environmental educators, teachers, came together around our respective kitchen tables around the world and put together an immersive experience made up of 30 different quests or adventures. I suppose you could also call them modules, where learners and their families could check in and complete online learning that was open access. So we had wonderful worldwide partners who were sharing their materials and their resources, everyone from National Geographic to the Nature Conservancy, to World Wildlife Fund, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a really incredible, positive way of utilizing our time and energy in a very trying and stressful time back in April of 2020, when we were all just wrapping our heads around what this pandemic could mean.
That's great. So indeed, your experience shows how we can really join forces to quickly respond to a challenge, even if we're placed all over the world. And despite the efforts, it is true that the learners were no longer able to have direct experience on site or interaction with others, which are key elements to ESD activities. So how did the Earth School try to make ESD learning more engaging and active as possible in digital space?
Well, the trick was to connect our learners to the things that they use every day, from the clothes they wear to the food they eat to the technology they were using to actually participate and interact with Earth School. And in this way, we connected them through the materials that they used to nature and to natural processes. And by awakening that sense of wonder and that sense of connection to the natural world, we were able to then gently guide the learners into hands-on activities, experiential activities that would increase their sense of empowerment and their sense of agency. So for instance, in one of our quests, which was the plastic pollution problem, we worked with Precious Plastics, who designed wonderful hands-on activities for students around the world to do, looking at the plastic that they used in their everyday lives and how that could be transformed within a circular economy model. And my students, as young as in grade 4, were able to really feel like they could participate in being part of a solution. And this was very important. So these interactive activities were interactive because of the online discussion. And so at the end of every module, there were discussion questions that were open to all of the questers, all of the learners using School. And in that way, people were able to share ideas, and the curators who designed each one of these quests were also able to interact with their learners. And I think that also helped drive a sense of interaction and reduce that sense of isolation. And, quite frankly, before the schools shut down, there was a big sense of isolation when it came to ESD. And as students were trying to wrap their heads around the world with our climate crisis, a lot of gloom and doom does set in, and that can lead to a sense of paralysis and apathy. And one of the real mandates of School was to ensure that the messages, while not sugarcoating anything, were ones of empowerment and being able to be part of the solution and being able to learn more about how your world worked, while actively learning about the issues that was facing the planet and what you as a learner, a young learner, could do to be part of the solution.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I think really starting with what learners see in their surroundings at home and trying to overcome this gloomy future outlook and trying to do and take action in their surroundings with concrete activities that can be shared with others across the world using a digital platform. That's a great idea to promote ESD during the pandemic. Maria, now over to you. In your primary school in Greece, what were the issues that you faced, and how did you try to make ESD learning as engaging and active as possible?
Thanks for having me here with you. At the start of the pandemic and the lockdown, I noticed that my students were more easily tired and distracted with digital learning compared to the situation in classroom. So I needed to make the session short and engaging and to give enough break time as a basic condition of learning. I thought about what is the easiest ESD activity for my 7-year-old students to do individually at home. And I thought of seeds. So we started planting seeds and observed their growth in a diary. Children also observed the plants in their balconies, yards, and neighborhoods, taking photos. The aim was to create a collaborative digital book with another class from Poland. The students from the two countries uploaded their photos on a common Padlet, and this was the material for a joint virtual exhibition. Similar to the Earth School experience, observations of the surroundings led to a more in-depth discussion. For the Sustainable Gastronomy Day, my students addressed issues of food factories, hunger, sustainable eating, and the value of local products. They also created advertisements for our local products. And then we had breakfast all together as a class to share thoughts about healthy and sustainable food choices and create a sense of community. My students said they had the experience of being connected, as was the motto for the Aspinet schools during the lockdown, and strong as a big family.
Wow. Okay. I think having a breakfast together sounds like not only a very creative way of learning about sustainable, healthy eating, but also a great way to keep everybody emotionally connected. And indeed, in the spring of 2020, school closures actually impacted over 90% of the students across the world. And maintaining the sense of belonging and connection was and is still a big challenge. But on the other hand, digital connection also allowed us to connect with people in faraway places. And in this regard, I think I would like to invite Maria. Could you tell us a little bit more about the virtual collaboration with the school in Poland?
Yes. Maintaining a sense of continuity in learning and a sense of belonging in a community is crucial to build shared values on ESD. It is important for students to feel they are not isolated during the school closures and to know there are other students out there. Technology definitely can help us connect with others. For example, in my experience, at the start of the pandemic, when we could no longer work in class as usual, we discussed the difficulty with another teacher in Poland, Mrs. Beata Kubinska. We came up with the idea of creating a Greece-Poland virtual exchange, first on the occasion of the Earth Day. After that, we continued to organize joint activities in our classes and to keep the engagement of our students in a high level. For example, children were interested and happy observing how similar and different the plants in the balconies of the two countries are, and this made learning more fun and meaningful for them. This simple activity made them feel connected to peers in a different country on the topic of the earth we all share.
Excellent. So while we all knew that it was technically already possible to use digital technology to expand the outreach, it was never so vividly brought to us as was during this pandemic. And for many of us, it was a wake-up call to really explore a new way of doing ESD. So now I would like to invite Christian from Peru. How was it for you in Peru?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be here. Well, at the Amazon Rescue Center, we usually work with visitors who come from schools and villages, near the rescue center. But because of the COVID pandemic, we had to close our doors since March. And we also restrict our visits to the villages to prevent to spread the virus. So in order to adapt, for example, we collaborate with a virtual ESD teachers training on the Amazon, but not only from here, from the Amazon, I mean teachers from all around Peru. And that was something that we didn't thought of doing before the pandemic. We also created virtual visits to the rescue center. For example, even though the pandemic, there's a school in Lima, the capital, called Newton School. They usually visit the 3 regions of Peru during the year: the coast, the Andes, and the Amazon. So they did this activity through a virtual visit to a rescue center. So we realized that there is a new huge opportunity to reach wider audience.
Okay, great. So as you say, Christian, many of us who were pushed actually to make use of already existing simple virtual meeting technologies due to the pandemic came to realize new opportunities. But however, not all learners have access to digital devices and internet connection, which is becoming a huge problem. Could you please share your experience in trying to address the digital divide and to make learning more inclusive?
Yes, that is so true, unfortunately. I mean, to make this learning continuous during the pandemic, during the school closure, the Minister of Education of Peru invited organizers from Peru to share contents from the platform they created. It's called I Learn at Home. This is a platform from the Minister of Education. So thanks to this platform, the ESG materials we created were disseminated across the country for children from all around Peru through the TV, through radio, and through internet. In particular, there are many children in the villages here in the Amazon who do not have access to internet or TV. I mean, they don't even have electricity during the whole day. So we collaborated with a radio program on ESD to deliver learning to those children. It is very important to be specifically more creative when using the radio in order to keep the students interesting without visual images like we are doing now. It's a huge challenge. So we use storytelling with character in their special voices with the help of some friends. And now children, for instance, want to visit the home of Wayo. Wayo is that character that you are watching now. And that house, that home is at a rescue center. So this is a sign that they are becoming more emotionally closer to the Amazon.
Oh, great. Really, I think your story of building emotional attachment to the Amazon using radio and TV is very inspiring. So this brings us actually to the second question on how can resilient ESD structures be built that ensure that ESD learning can continue in digital and remote format. And for this, I would like to invite each of our panelists to share your thoughts. Maybe Christian, maybe you would like to start, and followed by maybe Kathleen, Maria, and Yusuke. So over to you, Christian.
Sure, absolutely. I personally know the importance of the access of education. When my grandmother was a child, she was not able to attend to the school because her dad thought that she didn't, have the right to learn to write, to read, or to, because he thought that she could write letter to her boyfriend. That was 90 years ago. And unfortunately, nowadays, there are many children in the Amazon in the same situation because of the COVID pandemic and because of the digital gap. And that is not fair. So at the minimum, we need to ensure basic access to learning. For example, there is this movement, one child, one radio. This is led by a great teacher called Tanith Peña. So to make this remote learning more resilient, it needs to be like more interactive. For example, not only children living in the villages in the Amazon receive messages from their educators based in the big cities, but their own messages and their own observations could be also be transmitted to their peers through the radio. That's an idea. So, and when I was a little kid, I was like very inspired and fascinated by my grandmother's story. She used to live in the Amazon most of her life. So I think that we should think of ways to make use of those knowledge of the elders and also of our native communities on ESD. And we don't need to start from zero. Like, for example, our center provided materials to this platform for the Minister of Education. So we can create new opportunities by strengthening the collaboration between formal and not formal education. I mean, this pandemic is something very bad that happens to all of us, but also is creating new opportunities to work together.
Hi. Yeah. And so this is, it's an amazingly inspirational story that Christian just shared with us. And it might seem a little hard to imagine that here in Canada, we also face many challenges when it comes to access to digital tools and access to internet. And yet this is a situation that we have here as well. When you talk about resiliency and how to build resilient structures, I think one of the keys is to make digital learning less passive. As an outdoor and experiential educator in my graduate work and later on in my work with McGill, I was constantly up against how passive teaching was in general, and the whole fill up your heads model that needed to be turned on its head in any case, and understand that learning is a collaborative experience and is an emotional experience for all learners everywhere, whether you are in front of a screen or in a classroom. And so this creation of Earth School for myself as a practitioner, and I think for the 500,000 users of Earth School so far in dozens of countries around the world, has shown that digital learning doesn't need to be passive, and that ESD can be integrated and project-based learning can be integrated into a digital platform, but clearly with partnerships and with interactivity built in at various steps along the way. And I think this is what needs to be developed more. And I know we will have an opportunity to speak to that toward the end of our panel today. We need to have a real clear sense of where we're going with our ESD activities. We need to provide, as we said earlier, an opportunity for people to connect from the heart, connect from the head, and then do something with their hands. And it sounds simplistic, it goes all the way back to John Dewey, but learning with the head, the heart, and the hands is really the way we need to approach all education internationally, ESD and digital education included. Collaboration with other schools and with other learners is also incredibly important. For teachers particularly, we need to find a way to bridge the divide in terms of how ESD is approached, how it is introduced to learners, how teachers are trained in ESD, and using digital platforms that were developed during the pandemic might actually be utilized and continue to have a really good active life by being used as teacher training tools and professional development tools. Thank you.
And in my turn, I would like to focus on the need to support teachers and help them facilitate ESD activities in digital and remote settings. To begin with, not all teachers are positive about technology. Teachers also need training to use technology more easily. In my experience from the past few months, I found that it takes a lot of time and energy to compile children's feedback, their work, and turn their work into a collective work, like a class blog or a video. And it is important for the children to see their work exposed to an audience. This exposition in our days happens digitally. So teachers like myself need more time and support to provide quality ESD products in digital learning settings. Another point is to ensure teachers' autonomy and encourage their creative adaptation of the curriculum in the formats that fit the digital remote learning context. What I mean, for example, shorter sessions, more break time, and for young students, projects broken down into small segments that are easily to follow on their own. Another thing is the use of tools like Padlet, Vimeo, emails, quizzes to create interesting activities are very important because they can make learning more fun and engaging for the students. Last but not least, collaboration. And it was mentioned by the previous speakers. Collaboration with other ASP.NET schools and ESD organizations must be supported. Cooperation turns digital learning from a challenge to an opportunity. There is a need of platforms or a platform or another medium for teachers where you can easily find partners, similar to what Christian mentioned before. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, digital technology is more powerful, and also the face-to-face education is more important. Of course, tangible learnings on the the human being teach human being, right? So, but I want to talk about the perspective in the next decade. Which virtual reality technology is effective more not only in simulation and training, but also in social and emotional learning. Last year, I joined a project conducted by NHK Educational to clarify the effects of VR videos, movies regarding ecosystem. When students watch the movies, they said, hey, watch it to each other and communicate each other and howling emotionally. I think it is the social and emotional digital learning in ESD. Another example, so there is an interesting Harvard University project called EcoMube. Mube means a multi-user virtual environment. EcoMube is a virtual world to explore the reason why the creature disappeared from the pond. Students can use tools to measure the acid level of water, can change the scale, dive into the water, and can go back to the past using timescale control to learn about loss of biodiversity. Using the virtual reality technology, those cognitive and emotional experiences can be etched into people's long-term memory. It can change people's behavior and will relate to the sustainable development.
Great. Thank you very much, Kathleen, Christian, Yusuke, and Maria for your inputs. So let us try to summarize what the speakers have shared. So in summary, we learned from the pandemic period that in order to support ESD digitally and remotely, we need to work together to quickly adapt to the situation to ensure continued and reinforced efforts. It is important to make it active, engaging, with emphasis on social, emotional, and behavioral learning dimensions of ESD, and maintaining a sense of connection and creating opportunities to expand the community of practice is very important. And finally, and but not the least, making it as inclusive as possible is the key to the success of ESD. And on the second question, of building resilient structures for ESD in digital or remote format. First of all, ensuring basic access and exploring new opportunities for ESD through collaboration. Supporting program development to make digital and remote ESD programs more engaging and action-oriented. And of course, supporting teachers to help them facilitate ESD in digital and remote settings, and exploring new possibilities in the future through technologies such as virtual reality. These were some of the points that were raised by our panelists today. Now, I would like to open the floor for question and answers. And thank you for all your questions and comments shared in the question box, Q&A box, and comment box under the YouTube and Zoom link. Among many questions compiled, we have selected a few to raise to the relevant panelists. First question that I would like to share and raise is this one. The pandemic is still ongoing in many parts of the world. And based on the lessons learned from the first phase, could you please share one thing that you plan to do better or plan to do differently in the coming months to make sure that ESD is well practiced in digital or remote settings? So this is the first question, and I would like to invite all panelists to respond, maybe starting with Christian, Kathleen, Maria, and Yusuke. So maybe Christian, over to you.
Yes, hello. Yes, I mean, the pandemic, unfortunately, is still going on in many countries, and the schools are still closed here in Peru as well. So something that we learned from this past month is that we need to take advantage of this new technology that we have now. It is a huge challenge because there is a huge digital gap, especially here in the Peruvian Amazon. But it is also a great opportunity, and we need to take this opportunity as well. And we also need to involve not only children, their parents, I mean, the whole family, the whole society. It is very important. ESD is for everybody, not only for children. So we have to find the best ways to engage all the society on this matter. You know, it is I think it's our duty. We all have to understand and to do this. So lucky for us, we are going to be able to open or close this month, we think, of course, with the safety and safety conditions. But it is important to learn from this pandemic. And for us, it's very important to use the technology that we have now.
So maybe Kathleen?
Yes. I'd like to follow up with what Christian was just saying there about collaboration. This is a fantastic opportunity for us to really have an entry point into that family learning environment. And I think one of the lessons that we learned is that much as, you know, around the proverbial dinner table, stories from school tend to be shared. When you're actually in school at the dinner table, or in the, you know, or in the living room, or wherever the child is doing their online learning, the family is around, and there is this permeability that can be that we can benefit from as practitioners in ESD. So I think that was a very good point that he made. I think collaboration is the key, is the lesson that I learned from our first go at this, is if we can come together to collaborate around the world to respond to COVID, we can also come together around the world to respond to the big challenges facing our planet. And I think that reality has become clear to our youth as well, and to teachers everywhere. And that's something that we need to use this as a springboard. And so I would say building in more interaction, more action-oriented teaching and learning opportunities is another thing that is a take-home message from this. And exploring new technologies that for many teachers, we are not familiar with, and yet our students are highly familiar with, and to increasingly give them those roles. And this is, of course, different depending on what part of the world you're in, but certainly in this part of the world, I am the one who is always learning from my students when it comes to this. And I think that also can build a sense of empowerment and a sense of agency in our youth. And so that's something else to explore there. Thanks.
Thank you, Maria.
I totally agree with Kathleen. I would like to focus on some other points. First, we have to make sure that all our students have the internet connection and they have devices. And this can be done through collaboration with the parents associations, the ministry, and everyone that can offer on this problem. And after that, after we make sure that all the children are connected, I think one important thing, what I found from my experience, very important, is hands-on connected activities. Not only just being on a screen and doing nothing, but making at the same time connected activities hands-on. This creates a sense of community, a sense of family, and at the same time, maybe it sounds controversial, but we have to use virtual activities as well, like the online exhibition I showed you, because this creates the digital connectivity, which is important as well. Thank you.
Okay, so I agree with the other panelists' ideas. It is important to continue studying students learning. Like in this case, so I would say prepare the hybrid learning environment if possible. So for example, so that someone mentioned that the students who didn't have these devices and not access it. In this case, probably the education board and the government need to support the children. Fortunately, our Ministry of Education planned to distribute devices to all children before Corona. So the government decided to implement the budget for the plan ahead of schedule. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think now we have lots of other questions. There are some individual questions raised directly to each of the speakers. So I would like to now direct them to, first of all, one question to Kathleen from Slovakia. The question is, the wonderful Earth School initiative aimed to empower learners. I know it's very popular in my country. That's a good news. I wonder if there were any mechanisms to put in place to evaluate the impacts of these quests in Earth School.
Well, thank you for your question. It's appreciated, and I'm happy as well that it was well utilized in Slovakia. This is ongoing, and I know that our partners at UNEP and UNESCO and TED-Ed, for that matter, are looking at different metrics to better understand what the impact has been. And this is, of course, an ongoing project. So Earth School is still up and running and is still available, free and open access for anybody who is interested. Just to answer another question that also came in about how to connect to it. So these are interesting questions, and this is what I would hope would continue to be looked at, is to get some research done as to, you know, who the users were, what the impacts were. We have various different ministries of education around the world who have utilized Earth School as a training tool and as a framework for their educators. And so to get that story out as well. So I really appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. There's one question, I think it's something for Christian. So digitalization helps to maintain education opportunities, but what do we do in the regions where there's no access to digital education due to the lack of internet access and equipment? I think from your experience in Peru, Christian, maybe you could have share some points on this. Thank you.
Yes, something that really work here in the Peruvian Amazon, in the villages, is the radio. I mean, this program I learned from home, this platform, use the TV, internet, and radio. TV and internet, it's perfect for big cities. You know, children have access to internet and TV. But at least here in the Amazon, the radio is the best way to do it in the villages. But they don't have electricity all day long. So what this movement led by this teacher, Tanith Peña, One Child, One Radio, is doing is that they provide radios to children. That radio work with battery, so they don't need electricity, so they can listen to their lessons. Of course, it's not the same thing that a teacher going to the village and teach to the children, but at least we are giving them something. They are not staying isolated. You know, it's very important to do at least the minimum, but we have to do something in order to reach all the children, and they cannot stay like 90 years ago without education. They need education.
Thank you very much. I hope that helped to address the question. Now we have one question directed to Maria. How did you manage to motivate students to actively participate in these activities during the pandemic?
First, the new devices, the electronic devices, are something that the children like. They are in their daily life in our country. So the medium was friendly to them. I didn't have to advertise it. They were very keen to go on the platform and see how it works and press all the buttons and see all the possibilities. What I had to do to keep their interest was not to have long sessions, because they were distracted after after 45 minutes for 7-year-old students. They needed a break. And I kept all the work in small segments. I think this is one of the keys. And the second one is to showcase their work. Whatever they gave to me, they sent to me in all mediums. I took it and I made something out of it so they could see it, like a video or a class blog or something else.
Great. So keeping it short but sweet, that's the key. We have one question directed to Yusuke from Miss Charlotte Bonner. She asks, she's interested in the presented map. Is there a framework that's being used across the whole of the Japanese education system? And how was it developed? I think she's referring to the map shown from the Kumamoto experience.
Thank you for your question. That's the original framework in school, the school in Kumamoto City. So we have the national curriculum, and then the teachers need to follow the curriculum. So during the school. Then at that time, the teachers get together and consider how to integrate the ESD ideas of sustainable development goals in curriculum. At that time, so they made us a map related to the contents in each subject. So integratedly and the following the many things, experiences and sometimes researching. Yeah, many activities included in the map.
Thank you very much. So that is something that was originally developed in Kumamoto, and that's perhaps something that could also be shared. And after the session, we will of course share the slides with you for your reference as well. And several people have asked, and I think this is a common question for all of us, very short responses from each of the panelists. Several people have asked about the negative side of digital, for example, being in long hours in front of monitor, possibly online bullying and etc., other side effects. How can this be addressed? Have you had any particular experience regarding negative sides of digitalization or use of radio or other forms of remote learning? And how did you address that? Maybe Kathleen, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this became quite evident really fast that the kids were just staying in front of their monitors in dark rooms for very long stretches of the day, very unhealthy. And so what I really highly recommend is that you include interactive experiential activities where you are really encouraging them to shut everything down, go outside, do an experiment, whether it's going outside or going to the fridge and literally playing with your food to better understand where it comes from, how it's grown, how you could make different choices as a family, etc. Anything that's hands-on and anything that has that interconnection, that human connection, is so important. And so building in ways to share those experiences, which Maria also touched on, I think is hugely important. So they're kind of introduced to something, they get excited about it, they're invited to do an experiment, and they're invited then to have some way of communicating that with the rest of the group.
Indeed, this human touch is always something that we need to keep in mind. Any of the other panelists who would like to respond? Maria, yes?
Yes, I agree with Kathleen. She touched every point of the subject, of the topic, because you see children, they are very excited at the beginning, but then they start being tired, and you see that in their movements and in their eyes, and you say, okay, just leave it and go do something with your hands, even if this is writing on a book or something like that. It doesn't need to be a very exciting activity. So they need to change medium, not to be long hours on the screen, be in front of the screen.
Exactly, doing something with your hands and tangible instead of being sitting in front of the monitor. That's a very important point. I think I will have one last question before we close. One question is that what is the role that parents can play to support learners in ESD learning in digital or remote settings? So the role of parents, maybe I would invite Christian to start.
Sure. I think parents they are playing a great role nowadays, because they are basically the co-teachers of the students, of the children now. I mean, of course, with this remote learning, the teacher cannot be with the children, but the parents are the key role in their family for their children education. So it is very important, the presence, but not only the parents, I mean the family, the whole family. As Catherine said, it is very important. It is an opportunity for the family to come together and maybe learn together.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Maybe Kathleen, would you like to respond as well?
Yes, I think that this is an incredible opportunity. First of all, as educators, we've always recognized that without a strong family support network, our students struggle. And this is important for us to build in response to the pandemic and in response to digital learning, to provide parents with a lot more support and tools to participate. And so as teachers, as educators, and as people working with the public as Christian is, and in the university setting like Yusuke, I think it's really important to integrate opportunities where parents and members of the community and NGOs and community groups can all come together around the idea of ESD, because this is what is going to drive us toward change, and this is what will give us a sense of hope and a sense of agency and empowerment, which I think is sorely needed right now by everybody. So yeah, I think this has actually been an incredible learning curve for all parents everywhere, that learning is difficult, that teaching is, much as everyone's been to school, they really don't know what it's like to be a teacher. And that is definitely very true. And to provide better tools, I think, going forward, to enable parents to be that partner, whether it's around the kitchen table or when their child is back in the classroom, which is where we know they really want to be. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Great, thank you. Maria, would you like?
Yes, I would like to say that the parents are involved 100% until the age of 8. It's not good to leave their children without supervision. Supervision must continue, in my opinion, until the age of 12, and maybe later on, if the child is not mature enough. And it is an opportunity for parents to find lifelong learning channels on the internet.
Indeed. It is ESD is relevant not only for the children but also to the parents as lifelong learners. And Yusuke, maybe you would like to also share your comments.
Okay, yeah. It's important, that parents need to learn about technologies. Students are digital native, but as a parents, digital immigrant. In this case, parents couldn't understand what they are doing or the meaning of the technologies. That parents need to they learn the things in deep. Just one word. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have to all learn to adapt. Thank you very much to Christian, Yusuke, Kathleen, and Maria for your inputs, and thank you to all the participants for your kind comments and questions. With this, we come to the end of the second online workshop on the transformative power of ESD for the world beyond COVID-19, ESD in digital and remote settings. We look forward to seeing you in the next workshop on Youth, ESD and Resilience, Young People Mobilize and Empower Beyond the Crisis, which will take place on Thursday, 12th of November at 2 p.m. Paris time. We are excited that this session will be also led by young people who are active in transformative engagement for sustainable future. And registration is available in the link shared in the chat. And as usual, detailed announcement will be shared 2 weeks before the event on UNESCO's website and ESD newsletter. And you will find the recording of this workshop in English, French, and German on the UNESCO YouTube channel. And a link will be shared with all participants who signed up for the workshop. So with this, we would like to close our second online workshop. Thank you very much to everybody and have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.